So today we are in the studio with Jen. Thank you, Jen, so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and we're going to talk about Enneagrams because I think people really are into Enneagrams in our community. And I also hear that you are the expert and queen of Enneagrams. So I'm really glad that you're able to come and just share with us about it.
Yeah, sure.
But before we begin, for those that don't know what an Enneagram is, like, can you just tell us what that is?
Yes. So the Enneagram is a tool that is used that's basically based on the hypothesis that all of human behavior is motivated by nine core fears, and on the flip side, nine core like desires of things that we want to attain. And everyone has all nine of these fears and motives inside of us. But there's usually like one particular fear, and these fears are all unconscious. They're very like buried deep, beyond usually everyday like reasoning. But there's usually one core fear that we like don't want to happen to us. That is called your particular Enneagram type for you out of those nine, even though, again, we have like all nine of those fears. And so it's just the way I describe it is it's just a tool that gives people terminology, like shortcut terminology, that when someone says, like, oh, I'm a 2 or I'm an 8, you can, if you know the tool and the definition of what that fear is, you can kind of automatically understand, like, okay, this person, like, their core motivation is like very different from mine in a certain way, and they see the world a little differently than me, and I know now how I can better work with them or communicate with them, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not necessarily saying like, it's kind of just like a linguistic, like, these are definitions of like things that organically already happen and how like humans like behave, and we're just like kind of titling it and labeling it to make it easier to like talk about and explore and understand.
See, I feel like even just this first intro of this conversation, I already learned so much because I had no idea that the Enneagram was based off of our fears, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's how it dictates like who we are or our motivations, as you would say.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like telling you who you are, but rather just pointing out how you're different from others, because there's a lot of personality systems that focus on like your strengths, like Strengths Finder and things like that. Like, what do you like? What do you prefer? But like, you can all like and prefer so many of the same things. Really, if you want to really like understand who you are and like why you do the things you do, it's better to look kind of at the dark side, and see like things that maybe you don't want to actually consciously admit to yourself are the reasons why you like do things. And that's how you like splice and get to understand like, oh, this is what motivates me, like, and that's very different and core to me and unique to me compared to like your sibling or like, you know, your coworker and things like that.
So I think on a broad level, a lot of people would think that the Enneagram is like a personality test kind of type thing. How does that differ from something like the Myers-Briggs? And I mean, gosh, there's so many personality tests, right? Like, what makes the Enneagram like that much more special or accurate in your mind?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to say like the Enneagram is the best tool or whatever, because whatever works for people is great. But I am very personally passionate about it just because it has helped me so much. I would say also I'm actually like a pseudo student of like Myers-Briggs as well. I've been like casually getting into it over the years as well. But I would say for Myers-Briggs, it's a tool that kind of describes how somebody thinks, like how does your brain most naturally want to take in information and organize it and process it, and understand your relationship with people. It's like the how of your brain, and then the Enneagram is like the what. Like, what is your brain actually thinking about? Like, sure, you're going to process information a certain way, but like, what are you going to do with that information? And that's kind of like the Enneagram. I'm not too familiar with any of the other tools that are out there. But I would assume they are based on again, like finding particular skill sets or strengths. Whereas the Enneagram is kind of going beyond behavior, beyond external factors, and kind of trying to get into the inner motivations of things to unpeel the why of the what. And so, yeah, I was going to say something else about that, but I just forgot.
It'll come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. No worries. I think I really resonate with what you're saying, because I think a lot of the tests are like, not that they're surface level, but it's a little bit more one dimensional. But when you kind of take the time to understand who you are on an Enneagram, like one of the numbers, like it really helps you understand who you are more and like why. Like we'll get into it later, but like even a healthy like number versus a non-healthy number. And I think that when I like reflected on like different parts of my life and what I've experienced, I'm like, that was when I was unhealthy, and that was like so true. Or when I'm healthy, like this is how I function. So
Yeah.
what are you mentioned that there were like 9 different Enneagrams or personality. Do they call it a personality, or is it just an Enneagram?
Yeah, it's
How do
like
you say it?
the Enneagram, when you reference the Enneagram, it's like just the tool breakdown. And then when you want to reference the different types, you call them by types.
Types. Okay.
Yeah.
What are the 9 different types?
Should I just go through
Yeah.
them
Or
really
maybe you
quickly?
could tell us like what they are and what the characteristics of those are.
Sure. Okay. I'll try to do like a speed run
Yeah.
through, because having 9, there's a lot. This is not going to encompass the fullness of like what each type is like, but bare bones basics. So, first of all, the types, their technical names are numbers, right? It's like 1 through 9. And we refer to them as numbers because numbers have no like good or bad connotations with those words. And because we don't want to like bias people saying like certain types are better than others, or certain fears are like more stupid than others, right? You don't want to ever do that. They're just unique to you, and if you have that fear, that's okay. But for the sake of this speed round, I will cheat and use like nicknames, because that tends to help like beginners, because there's 9. So type 1, their nickname I would say is the perfectionist or the reformer, and they are particularly oriented around about being perfect, or being like morally perfect. And that's because their deepest fear is like making a mistake or being wrong, and imperfect in some way that shows them that they're like bad. And type 2, their nickname is like the helper or the lover. They're usually very warm and caring people. I'm a type 2. And their deepest fear is being rejected, or unwanted. And so they do everything they can to kind of be warm and friendly and inviting, and like, because they would never want to reject anyone. And they're trying to make you like not reject them, basically. Type 3, their nickname is the achiever or the performer. They are very goal oriented, usually, not always. Because their deepest fear is kind of having no reason for anybody to admire or respect or want them around. Kind of similar to type 2, but they feel like failure is like the worst possible thing that could happen to them, and they can only be like the best, or they're like worthless.
I'm a 3.
Oh, you are?
I am
Hello,
a 3.
Type 3. You're like, I resonate.
I know.
Type 4 is their nickname is they've been called the individualist or the romantic bohemian, the artist. Their deepest fear is like not having a complete identity, like not being significant in like a unique way. They usually feel like everyone else around them, like you have like a thing that's like yours and you're complete in that, and I feel incomplete and I need to figure that out. And they deeply fear being abandoned by others because they're like, something is wrong with me. So that's usually what drives them to like create and like make something of themselves. Type 5, their nickname is usually the investigator, the researcher. Their deepest fear is not being capable on their own to like handle life. So they're usually like the most stereotypical image of a 5, although again, like it can be different, but is like a PhD scientist, like in a Hollywood movie, like spitting off like all of those facts, and like they're clearly an expert in something, but then they're like a little more hesitant to connect with others relationally and stuff. That's because they're arming themselves with knowledge to kind of compensate for feeling like they're not able to handle things. Type 6, their nickname is the loyalist, but on the flip side, the devil's advocate. They're one of the most complicated types on the Enneagram because each 6 can be so different from every other 6 you meet. And their fear is being in danger without any like adequate backup plan or support from others to help them. And so they're always trying to make sure that they're ready for any worst case scenario, and that they have like a supporting network of people around them. So that's kind of why they're the loyalist, but they're also the devil's advocate because they're like trying to interrogate things to make sure they're safe and like, let's play devil's advocate here and make sure we've like really thought things through. Type 7, their nickname is the enthusiast or even the hedonist. They're usually very joyful people, the life of the party kind of characters, and it's because they're always looking for like fun, positive, happy, like fast stimulation. And that's because their deepest fear is like their own internal darkness and pain. 7s usually like spend their lives unconsciously like running away from like painful things that have happened that they don't really want to process, and so they're like, let's go to the next thing. And then 8s, their nickname is the challenger, and their fear is 8s kind of see the world in terms of like strong and weak, and they don't want to be weak. They definitely want to be strong. They don't want to be taken advantage of the way that they've seen other like people at the mercy of other people with power. And so they kind of arm themselves up, and they're always looking to make sure like that no one would ever take advantage of them. And they deeply fear being betrayed or manipulated. And then 9s, their nickname is the peacemaker. They fear like disharmony and disconnect. They fear conflict. And so they are always trying to, the most stereotypical version of them is like a very easygoing, sweet, gentle person, like chill vibes kind of person. They're willing to, go along with whatever like everybody else wants. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't mind. Either way is fine. And that's because they just grew up like fearing breaking of the peace. They always want things to be status quo chill internally inside of them, as well as like externally in their relationships. Yeah.
How does one go about figuring out which type they are?
Yeah, so that can vary person to person. Sometimes people like hear about the Enneagram and like someone might listen to what I just said and like already they like feel like 1 or 2 numbers like is kind of hitting them and making them uncomfortable. And they can just look into those 2 numbers online, and then usually they'll find like, oh God, like that's how I was like, oh my God, I'm a 2. But for others, it takes time. So there are a lot of tests you can take online. They're very free. And you can kind of see like, the top 3 numbers or whatever that these tests will suggest that you might be. Ooh, sorry. But I would encourage anyone who has never heard of it or doesn't know what their number is to just take that as a jumping off point, a reference point, and then you kind of have to learn about the numbers yourself and the types yourself, and then be really introspective and like brutally honest with yourself. Like, is that why I do this? Or, like, what am I not wanting to fully know about myself? Of course, there's other types. Like, I found, like, usually 8s are pretty chill about being an 8. They're like,
they're proud of
that's
it.
me. Yeah. They're like, yeah, I'm strong, like, and then they don't feel any like shame or embarrassment. But usually you're in the right direction if you start feeling a little embarrassed or like exposed, like that's probably a sign that you're getting warmer. But for some people it does take a long time. Like I've talked about the Enneagram at work as well, and so I was that person at work too. And somebody was talking to me about it, and they were like, "Oh, I think I'm a 5. Like, I just love information." I was like, "Yeah, that's great." Like, that's another thing about the Enneagram. Like, you can't tell anyone what they are really because it's so internal. Like, it has to be a process that that person chooses for themselves. And so he was telling me like, "Yeah, I'm a 5," and he was a data scientist, and he was super smart. And I was like, "Yeah, it makes sense, cool." And then like a year later, he messaged me on Instagram being like, "I think I might be a 1." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he was like, "Yeah, I was like reading more about it, and like I hate being wrong." And I was like, "Yeah, there's overlap with 1 and 5 motivations. I don't know." And then just the other day, he messaged again, like months later, and he was like, "So it turns out I'm a 3, and I am like deeply afraid of failure, and I don't want to be worthless, and I hate myself. LOL." And I was like, "Okay."
What a journey he's been on.
Yeah, it took him like 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So that can happen too. So yeah, it really depends.
So two-part question in response to what you just shared. I guess first of all, just hearing that, do you think then it's better to take a test versus trying to self-assess? Because I think even sometimes just reading certain things, I think human nature sometimes is they're also in self-denial sometimes of what they may be or may not be. So like to self-diagnose on reading like what you think you might be versus taking a test, like do you think that there's one that's better than the other? That's the first part of my follow-up.
I think so. I used to be like 100% against tests. I was like, "No tests, like they're so misleading. If you don't know yourself, you're going to answer the questions inaccurately." But I think like I'm a little more like relaxed about it now. I think they can be super helpful as starting points, as long as you don't take the test and just go, "Okay, it says I'm a 9, so I'm a 9." Like, it's way more valuable to look at those numbers and then be curious about those numbers, and then like it's also more high effort, but to take the time to learn about those types. I find that learning about all 9 types, again, even though that's even more effort, is the most helpful, because sometimes you like hear a type and you're like, "Isn't everyone like that?" And then you kind of hear all 9 and you're like, "Oh, okay, there's like 1 or 2 that I'm like really not like at all." And that helps me like go to the right direction of, which type you are. I'm also technically an Enneagram certified life coach. So you can also hire an Enneagram coach to kind of have those sessions one-on-one with them. And through those discussions, they can help you kind of introspect and explore like what has been going on for you. And usually if you're going to a coach, there's like a goal you want to hit or a problem you're trying to solve, right? And so they can kind of help you tackle that issue or that goal through the lens of like why you got here, or and what's going on there, and that can kind of really help in the end. But that's also that requires money. So I would probably recommend, if you really want to take like the shortest way, sure, take a test online, but don't take the results as final, and just like explore and be curious. And sometimes there'll be like 2 numbers you're stuck between, and you can kind of like put them on like hats and be like, throughout your day, like explore like, "Oh, am I doing this because I'm a 7? Or like, what is the 7 about? Like, do I resonate with that fear right now? Or is it because I'm like a 2 or a 9 or whatever?" And you can kind of do that. But there's no like immediate way to find your type.
Yeah.
So.
And then you're in the case of what you shared about your friend, he went through a discovery phase and like figuring out like his number. But do you think that once you have your number, like, do you believe that people really have 2 different types? I know, and like if we get more into the detail of Enneagram, there's the wings, which means it's a hybrid of like your main number and then maybe a secondary number, right? I actually like really love the Enneagram too. So it's like, but do you believe that people have like one core, or do you think that that is a number that is able to change as you grow. Because I think like maybe one of the arguments with Myers-Briggs is as you grow with your just life experiences, like the way that you treat situations does change, you know, and I believe that with the Myers-Briggs. But I feel like the Enneagram is a little bit more innate. So what is your take as a professional on that, aside from the discovery process? If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So I think different Enneagram teachers and coaches and therapists who use the Enneagram have different beliefs on this. So, like, don't take my opinion as like the universal opinion. But my personal opinion is that the Enneagram is innate. I do believe it's nature. I do believe that God. So the way that I view the Enneagram is these 9 fears are also 9 like different lenses through which we like different human beings can kind of connect to a core part of like God's heart and character. And so like even though there's like a dark side to these types, there's also like a beautiful side that like a 9 has a gifting that like a 2 does not, and that a 1 does not, you know, and vice versa for all of them. And so I do believe it is innate that God like designed me to be a 2. And it's just that like after, you know, arriving on earth, you know, Satan is here too, and he's also like wreaking havoc and trying to put fear in people's hearts. And he kind of twisted that gift that God gave me to really resonate with like the loving heart of God, to fear being rejected by others and like craving love, like fearing that I'm not loved, right, as a 2. So that's my personal belief, but you know, there are other theories out there, like maybe you're a blank slate when you're born and then something happens in your childhood. There are like cases where usually different types have like similar patterns of like something will happen, and then it they'll be like, oh, usually 6s had like this and this like when they were a kid, you know, and that can occur. So like, yeah, I don't know what the truth is. I definitely want to ask God when I get to heaven. But I think it's nature. And then as to your other question about can you have like 2 types? And then another question about can it change? Okay, so the question about 2 types. I keep hitting the mic. Okay, the question about 2 types. So there is something in the Enneagram that I almost hesitate to bring up because it might confuse people if they've never heard of it. So if you're new, don't look into this. But it's called tri-types. And so I learned about tri-types about like 2 to 3 years into me studying the Enneagram. And basically it was like discovered and coined by like a researcher who also loves the Enneagram. And she found that people have not just one Enneagram number that they like deeply are like motivated by and they like maneuver through the world with, but actually 3. And the way that works is there's 9 fears, but you can group these 9 into 3 groups of 3. And these 3 groups of 3, like if you're a 2, 3, 4, you share a commonality. And if you're a 5, 6, 7, that's a group, and like 8, 9, 1. And these 3 groups are like associated with a part of your body because it just makes sense. So like you have like head types, and then like heart types, and like gut, body, instinct types. And so tri-types is this theory that this researcher brought forward that in her interviews and studies of people found that we have like a lead number in all 3 of these like centers. So for me, like I am a 2, like at the core, but my tri-type I have found is 2, 1, 6. So I lead with my 2 in my heart, and then after that I use my gut with my 1, and then I have a 6 in my like head center. So this might be going over everybody's heads, but so I think that also creates like a lot of complexity and nuance when someone says like I'm a 4 or a 7. Like they could be very different depending on like those secondary like centers of intelligence, as we call it, that they're leading with. So yeah, so that is a theory that I believe, because once I unlocked my tri-type, I was like, this makes so much sense why I do everything that I do. With so much more like specificity than just like the generic 2, although like, you know, if you know your number, that's like also very, very specific. But again, I think that can really confuse people. So
that's like the advanced tier of understanding Enneagram.
Yes, but that usually is how I respond to when people are like, but can't you have like multiple? I'm like, yes, we all have 9 fears in us, and then there's like 3 that are like really top, and then there's 1 that's like super, super top. So yeah, it gets really complicated and nuanced, but that's also why I love the Enneagram, because I'm like, wow, it's just like so deep. And then I think you had a question about can we change like our type over time? So the way the Enneagram works is, and this is universal, you never change your Enneagram type. You whatever type you are, whether you were born with it, which is what I believe, or you developed it at a young age, which is what other people believe, that type, once it's solidified, that's your type. And the Enneagram as a tool, with all of its like lingos and stuff, like actually has like a mapping system to help show you what like a healthier version of that type would look like. Because yes, on the Enneagram, you can evolve, you can become more mature and more balanced, and those fears don't have to control you so much. But like you can kind of predict what like an unhealthy version of your number versus like the healthiest, most mature version of your number is. So yeah, but you don't change your type. There is like a lot of confusion around that, I think, because there's like the Enneagram symbol, right? You see like a circle with all 9 numbers, and then there's like lines between them. You can think of it as like your home base number. You start at your home base number, and then you have certain like numbers whose like characteristics or energies you will like naturally move to when you're doing well or when you're not doing well. And I think that's why people get confused, because when I was first learning it, I was like, wait, I'm a 2, but then I like go to 4, and then also I go to like 8, and like I was just like, do I become an 8? But like, no, you don't. I will never become an 8. I will never become a 4, but I can like go to 4 space, is like how people in the Enneagram world like call it, or like I'm in 8 space right now, I'm so angry, like and things like that. So yeah.
Why do you think it's so important for people to know their Enneagram? And how can that personally help them in their lives?
I think you don't have to know your Enneagram in order to grow as a person. I think people can just naturally and organically grow, right? Life is hard and it forces you to learn things. But the Enneagram can just be helpful because it like puts language to things that you might have already been learning, and then it just like shortcuts you to like push you even further than you ever thought you could. Like I think I went to like this Enneagram conference like a couple years ago when I was like seriously considering becoming a life coach in it, and I was meeting these people, and a lot of these people that I was meeting there, like a lot of the 2s that, you know, were me, they were like in their 50s and 60s. And like when we were sharing about it, they were like, yeah, I just learned about the Enneagram. But also like at that stage in their life, they were like, I just got so tired of doing what I was doing. Like I just got so tired of it. And I keep getting myself in the same patterns of like relational problems and blah, blah, blah. And I just wanted another way. And they were already like naturally there. Whereas for me, like I got hit by the Enneagram like in my mid-20s, and it completely redirected my path. Like I realized the same things that these people are realizing now. And like in a lot of ways, I felt like I was more aware of those patterns than like they were like just starting to like become aware. So I think that's like the power of the tool, that you can really use it to like go so much more beyond like what you think you're supposed to be like at a certain stage in life. So I think it can be super helpful there. And I think like it's important. I don't think you need to know the Enneagram to like know God or like, you know, be any more or less loved by God. I believe like you could live your whole life without it. But knowing myself and exploring and challenging my core like fears really has helped me explore and understand where have I not in my heart allowed the gospel to like really sink in. Like, what do I not believe about like being loved by God? Because my core fear is like that I'm not lovable, right? And it's like, okay, I really need to like let the gospel sink into that part of myself. And if I didn't know that, like, I'm sure like God would have led me anyway, but it's just really enriched my relationship with Jesus. Like, whoa, Jesus, like, I'm so challenged now. Like, I didn't believe that you loved me, to this depth. Like, you always think you got it, and then like you go another layer deeper and you're like, no. So, yeah, I think it's important, whether you're a Christian or not, in knowing yourself, but especially if you're a Christian, especially if you know the Lord, I think it can really be meaningful in transforming your relationship with Him. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really like that answer and how you applied it to God and how like that applies to our life. I think for the Enneagram, for me, I think it's just, sometimes you don't know why you react to certain things or why you do things or take certain actions. But I think in my own discovery of my number, that helps me actually like know myself more, like just like, what you're saying earlier about the motivations of like why you either run from something or do something. And I think, even I actually was like so moved by like what I discovered about myself. I actually had like my husband and my sister take the test, and I'll tell you, after they realized their numbers and we kind of like looked into it, it made me also understand more about who they are and why they think the way they do. Versus before, I'm like, you're just so difficult, or I just don't understand you, right?
Yeah.
But once you kind of understand like a little bit more of the core layers, I feel like it helps me be more empathetic, I guess, to like sometimes like their actions and their viewpoints and their thoughts. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's such a good point that I can't believe I didn't bring up. Like, it helps you understand others like so much better.
Yeah.
That is so true.
No, it's amazing. Do you think that people should, is it good to surround yourself with people that like are like in the same numbers or in the same kind of aura, or is it okay to, because there's some like numbers, I guess, that are in conflict and stuff. So how much emphasis should people put on who they surround themselves with based on the Enneagram, or it doesn't matter?
Yeah, I think, I don't think it really matters. I think you can be friends with whoever, and actually like knowing the Enneagram can actually equip you to become better connected to anyone, no matter what number they are. Like when I first learned the Enneagram and I was like, oh, I'm like the soft, sensitive type 2. Cool. I immediately was thinking of a lot of people in my past that I was like, oh, I guess they weren't trying to be mean to me. They were just type 8s. And that really changed how I saw them, because before I was like, I'm so hurt by this person. Da, 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 da. And then I'm realizing, oh, they really don't mean anything by it. They like don't realize that they're stomping on me because I care about one element of a relationship and they care about this other thing when it comes to like working together or whatever. So I think the Enneagram can help you actually form friendships and connections and relationships with people who are very different from you. So would of course always recommend like always be friends with people who have different perspectives, because you have a lot of blind spots. Like in Enneagram language, I have like 8 blind spots because I'm only one of the 9 numbers, right? But beyond that, I think it's also important not to like box people into their number and be like, all right, I only have like friends who are like 5s and 9s and 4s, so I need to go find somebody who's like this number just because they're that number, right? Like you don't want to point at a person and be like, you type 3, like what is your perspective as a type 3, like, so that's always like important. Like the number one teaching of the Enneagram is that you are not your number. You are not the fears that grip you. We're using the tool to set you free from those fears. And so, yeah, that's always like super important. That's like a little like pet peeve I have with like the way that the Enneagram is becoming more popular. I think people on Instagram and TikTok, they're like lovely things about the type 1, like great things about type like 6. And I'm like, I guess that's fine, but also you're not your number, you guys. So,
that's so good. Like, don't let that define you.
Yeah. Like I'm always like, I'm not a 2. I'm actually working to unravel that part of myself and like show the world something else, like a 2 that is like freed, like freed in God's love. And yeah, but so that's like my little pet peeve on a tangent there. But also, it is very normal for people as they learn the Enneagram to start to have like personal biases against certain types.
Yes.
You have them, I have them, everyone will have them. And it's just good to be aware of that. And sometimes you'll find there are like trends, like I keep bringing up eights. Twos and eights are like very, very like energetically like opposed, right? Like one is seen as a little more soft and sensitive, and one is like very strong and like charismatic and powerful. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna like not get along. It just like really varies person to person. So I would just say like, yeah, if you start developing biases, that's okay. Just keep reminding yourself this is a personal bias, and not people are not their numbers, and you can still be friends with them. But if there's like a certain, like if you have a pattern of friendships or relationships with a certain type that you know always explodes, or you know always ends a certain terrible draining way, like that's good too, to be like, okay, for some reason I just have this weird chemical reaction with like this type. Like just to be fully transparent, as a 2, I have had a history of getting into these very entangled friendships with type 4s. Because 4s are like trying to figure out their identity and they don't want to be abandoned. And then me as a 2, I'm trying to like save people to prove that I'm worthy of love. So I'm like, let me help you. And then we get into this like weird, like savior, like rescued person, like, thing. And then, yeah. So like learning the Enneagram has really helped me identify that. And so like, it's actually helped me like save my friendships with my type 4 friends, because I'm like, whoa, I'm like doing this again. Let me stop myself.
Right.
Let me communicate to you at a meta level about what's going on. What are you feeling? Do you want me to rescue you? Okay, let's like take a step back and like have healthy boundaries. And it's been really good. So like, I'm really thankful that I can have these friendships and not do the same thing I was doing like in college, in high school, where I was just like, what's wrong with me? So yeah, sorry, I think I rambled there. But
No.
yeah.
But I think it goes to what you're saying, and actually as part of your intro, is that like it's the desire to truly like know yourself, you know, and then once you do, you're able to like deal with different personalities or situations, because you know like what are your triggers, or what, you know, just why you act the way you act. Yeah. So you obviously love the Enneagram, and you mentioned that you have a pursuit of turning this into or you actually have a life coaching business about this. So tell us a little bit more about how you're transforming your passion for the Enneagram into the business part.
Sure. So it's still very new and in its baby stages, but last year I finally took the leap and have my business. And I basically I have I have an Instagram account already.
What is it called?
Oh, it's Jenrhee Life Coaching. It's JENNRHEE Life Coaching. But I have a lot of like content ideas of like how I can kind of share about the Enneagram in like bite-sized, easy to digest ways. And also kind of correct a lot of the misinformation that is spreading across Instagram and
Yes.
TikTok about it. And I also have a YouTube channel where I do this series called Enneagram in Fiction. And I think educating my audience using fictional characters with the Enneagram is very safe, because it's like not a real person. So it's like, because, you know, the Enneagram can go really deep. And so you can use this like fictional character to like map out like their core motivations, like what it could possibly be and why, to like teach people about their numbers. And so the plan right now is to kind of grow my audience that way, and then like eventually funnel them to like a coaching website. But as of right now, I take like coaching clients like ad hoc, like people message me and then we like talk and have like a call and things like that. So I'm still trying to like work out my process, especially like still having a full-time job and things like that. But yeah, I'm just like, I'm really excited. I like with this new year, I think I'll have a little more time this year to focus on it. And so that's where I'm at with it. Yeah.
Well, what is the YouTube channel that you have so people can check it out, and give us an example of what some of those fictional characters are that you analyze?
Yeah. I don't remember what the handle of my YouTube channel is right now, but if you search Enneagram in fiction, you'll probably find me on YouTube. I have done, so what happened was, like a year or two ago, I was watching The Queen's Gambit on Netflix, which
That is such a good show.
so
the
good.
best.
So
Yeah.
good. And I was like, so like in awe of Beth Harmon, like this character. I was like, she's amazing. And I just really wanted to know, like, what type would she be? So I was talking about it with like different friends. And then I started getting in debates with these friends because they were like, oh, she's definitely this, like, da da da. And I was like, that doesn't feel right to me. And I just felt so convicted that, like, she was a sexual 5 that I was like, I need to make a video essay about this because, like, I am so done, like, just debating. Like, I need to prove she is this type. And that's kind of how my channel was born. So I've done Beth Harmon from The Queen's Gambit. And then after that, I think I did Elsa from Disney's Frozen, because she's also quite an interesting character. And then I think by that time it was like February, and I was like, let's do a Valentine's special. So I did Elizabeth Bennet and Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, and then like kind of took a hiatus. So like, but there's so many other characters that are like in my mind. Oh, I've also done the Avengers. I've done a few of the Avengers. There's too many of them. But that video I did in partnership with one of my good friends from college who's also like really into the Enneagram. And so we like uploaded this like 20-minute video on our channel, just like going through all of the Avengers and why we thought they were a certain type. And it's always really fun to like read the comments because people will be like, oh my God, this character is definitely this type, not that type. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. They're a fictional character. Right. No one can tell us what they are. But like, that's why I love this, because you can debate about it and like explore it on your own. And through the debate, learn the Enneagram better and like, therefore apply to people better and yourself better too. So.
Yeah. And then, you know, with your ventures into your coaching and your YouTube channel, what is that one thing that you're hoping to like really be able to make an impact on people's lives with? Like, what is that driving force?
I think for me, maybe this is just me being very in my 2 personality type, but like when I was learning it, I was like immediately thinking like, I can understand people better now, and like, you know, I can help them, right? So but I think I do have that drive. Like I think I honestly get more fulfillment talking to people and trying to help them understand themselves or their siblings or whoever, more than I do like doing my job as a program manager, like, right? And so it's just so like fulfilling to be able to like help people. Such a stereotypical 2 sentence, but yeah. And a lot of my like friends would joke, like even years before I ultimately took the leap, they were like, you're basically life coaching me right now, you know? Like, why don't you just get paid for doing this? And so yeah, I think I would just love it if I could keep helping people like unlock something to like unblock whatever was giving them a problem or whatever they were unconsciously afraid of, that like gives them the courage to like face it. I led a workshop at a small company offsite in LA last summer. And they were all therapists. It was the perfect audience to lead a workshop for. But it was just so beautiful, like seeing them slowly identify their types, and then, you know, being vulnerable and sharing like how their coworkers could better work with them and like the kind of things that they needed from each other to work better together. And I just like loved that. I loved being a part of that so much. Like, I was just like, this was such an honor, you know, and yeah, that's what I would like to do.
Yeah. So. No, I love it. Everyone's growing together and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I think for those that want to explore more, they can check out your channel, your Instagram, and certainly they can find you around church
Yes.
and chat with you further about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.